Ever wonder what it would be like to be in bed with me? Now you know. Terrible intro, but what's up, everybody? I wanted to just lay down and talk to you. And also, this is an excuse to use my C-stand that I bought. This thing cost me like $80-something. So, yeah, this is how I'm using it. But today, I wanted to just chill and talk about the idea of nostalgia. Because I think a lot of people, I think we all experience nostalgia. I think everybody, especially as you get older, you're like, oh man, when I was young, or when I did this, or when I was in my 20s, whatever. I think everybody does this. It could be a TV show, it could be anything that you really care about, or just had like a special connection with. I think everybody experiences nostalgia, and they're like, man, the good old days. I miss the good old days. I think you've heard everybody say that, because I think it's the reason why we reminisce on a lot of things is because everything just felt easier, right? I think everything feels easier when you're younger. When you're in your 30s and you think about your 20s, you don't think about all the aches and pains you ever had, right? Because you could spend all night out with your friends and still wake up early in the morning if you needed to for work, and it didn't feel like you got hit by a bus. But in your 30s, it feels that way. I'm sure it feels even worse in your 40s. I don't know. I'll experience that in a few years. But I think that's a lot of people think about, like people that party will say that. I think if you're like a nerd, a lot of people, like, especially I could speak from it, when I was reading comic books like heavily, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I could be like, man, comics were so much better then. And then you can look at somebody that was reading comics in the 90s and be like, man, comics are so trash today. They were so much better back then. You know what I mean? Like, everybody does this. It seems like every generation talks about like how things were better, or just, yeah, everybody. Like, so I think we've all experienced it. But I want to talk about something that might open up your mind. It might change your perspective a little bit on nostalgia. I'm not saying that nostalgia doesn't exist, or that we don't want to experience the things that we used to have when life just seemed great and carefree. And I'm also not taking credit for this idea, because I might have heard this from somewhere. But I can't find out where. I couldn't find where I heard this from if I did. But I'm not going to take credit for this. So if somebody else created this, I'm going to assume they gave it to me, or they planted the seed in my head to grow this idea. But I don't think many of us miss nostalgia, or I should say, let me rephrase this, because it's also about like missing the good old days, right? Because I think that's another like term for nostalgia, is I miss the good old days. And I don't think we necessarily miss the good old days. Or I don't think, if you are somebody that says this, I don't think you miss the good old days. I think you miss having fun. And I think that's a big thing to really think about. Because when we were younger, if you are one of those people that had like a big close friend group when you were young, and then you all grew up to become like, you all moved to other cities, or went to different colleges, or got different jobs, and, just drifted apart, got married, had children, like all of that stuff happens. I think that's what makes you think about like, oh, the good old days. Like for me, the good old days were like in high school when I was skating with a bunch of my friends, and like we were just having a good time. I don't talk to any of those people anymore. Like I did for a little bit. Some of them became terrible humans, and some of them I just drifted apart from. And, it is what it is. Everybody kind of drifts apart. Good old days could be like when you were in a relationship and you had somebody sleeping right next to you, like that could be your good old days. And I think you miss those feelings because you want them again, So it's not necessarily that you miss the good old days when all your friends were together. Yeah, I think part of it is true. But I think if somebody were to give you a brand new friend group that was just as good as that friend group, you wouldn't miss that as much. You know what I mean? And it's because you don't have it now. Not saying that this is for everybody, but I do think this is part of why a lot of people miss the good old days, and like, especially when it comes to media and all that kind of stuff, is because times were simpler and you had it. You had the things you liked back in like music was another suggestion, right? I still listen to everything I was listening to back in high school because everything felt so fresh and new, and it was easy to get music back in the day when I was growing up because there wasn't Spotify, there wasn't Apple Music, there wasn't all of this. You had to go to a fucking CD store to get new music. Like that's how you got new music. Or luckily I had an older brother that went to college. He was 4 years older than I am, and he would bring back music from college. And, I grew up in the age of freaking burn CDs and stuff. So I got a lot of music that I didn't have access to before because we didn't have the Spotifys and everything that make you curated playlists and the algorithm feeds you music that, you might like. And so I found it really cool listening to a new album from an artist I never heard of. And today, everybody can make music, right? Like you have SoundCloud rappers that nobody knows about. Like they become famous and then die. Like it seems, unfortunately, like there's a new SoundCloud rapper every week and then they die the next week. It's crazy and it's unfortunate, but that's how crazy the music scene is. But back in the day, like radio mattered. And so I think that's why some people be like, I miss the good old days. But I think it's just because it's harder to find that kind of stuff. And it's not as easily as accessible. And that's why it doesn't seem as fun. But you also had a lot of time when you were younger, right? Like you had a lot of time to sit in your room and listen to a new album. Nowadays, you have to listen to a new album while you're on your commute to work or when you're, going for your jog because you gotta, be healthier nowadays. You just don't have the time like you used to. So I think that's the perspective you need to remember is that it's not necessarily you're not missing the old days. You just wish you could do what you did back then today. I think if you did do exactly that, you'd probably have just as much fun. Because I can say that for sure, that I think if I had a group of friends, because I have friends that I would love to hang out with often, but none of them live in this state. So it's just kind of okay, cool, that sucks. But I figured if I were to live where my friends lived, I probably would hang out with them a lot more. And I wouldn't reminisce about the old days because I'm making new memories and having fun today. You know what I mean? Because here's the thing, perfect example. You guys have probably heard it multiple times throughout this Vita series, and especially recently with the most recent videos. But I think that, one of my favorite videos was a road trip I did. That was awesome. That happened after I graduated high school. That road trip happened, many, many years after high school. And if you had to tell me what were better memories, what my times in high school where I was skating all the time, or this road trip with friends that I didn't even grow up with, I'd probably say the road trip. Because that was just a great experience and I was having a blast. So, nostalgia isn't always as good as your brain makes you think it is. And you can have better moments than your nostalgia. You're just not having that fun anymore. And I think that's what we're missing. And it might be what you're missing. And just anybody that, if you constantly find yourself thinking about everything when you were younger was so much better and so much cooler and it's retro now or whatever and everybody's taking my old stuff, whatever you feel, you probably just hate that you're not having fun today. And that's what I would put a lot of stock into that. And I would ask you to question yourself if you are having fun today. Because if you are having fun today, you're still going out on the weekends and you were just having a blast and you're dude, I can't wait to have another weekend like that, and you're still reminiscing about the old days, then I'd be curious to talk to you and why you think about that. Because I'd be shocked if that is the case. Granted, you can make arguments for certain things. I do think movies were better 10 years ago than they are today. That's because Hollywood was taking a lot more chances on movies back in the day. And Hollywood actors have actually even talked about this because DVD sales were a thing. And that's where a lot of the low budget movies that people love were able to make their money back was DVD sales. But since DVD sales, because the streaming service killed everything, that isn't as good anymore. So we're not getting as many cool movies because there's not that extra form of cash flow for those movies to make their money back. I think Matt Damon said that on a Hot Ones episode. So go check out his Hot Ones episode if you want to hear what he was saying about it. But yeah, so things like that, I can understand, like you miss the old days. But for the most part, I think it really comes down to maybe you're just not having as much fun today as you were back in the day. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's kind of what I want to talk about. I got to use my C-stand. You got to lay in my bed with me for a little bit. But I'll see you in the next one. Bam!